Okay, so we are going to go ahead and dive in. Thank you so much for all of you who have joined live. Love to have you here. My name is Lisa, and I'm just going to adjust that. Perfect. And I'm a certified life coach through the Life Coach School with a master's in industrial organizational psychology, which is like psychology applied to the workplace. And so, what that means is I've taken a lot of the tools that I've gotten from school, from my certification, and from my own personal experience and put them together to create this webinar. I'm also a recovering people pleaser. So I completely relate to this topic, and it is one of the topics that I hold so dear to my heart because it's something that I think as women, a lot of us can struggle with. How do we show up as ourselves, but still fit into what society wants us to be? Do we even need to fit into what society wants us to be? And so I've spent a lot of time focusing on what do I want? How can I bring myself up that way? Because the way I think even just the workplace culture often is you're supposed to be nice and polite and humble. And when you make a success, you're supposed to say, oh, it was my team. We did it together. There's all these like rules out there about how you're supposed to show up. And it really stops us from being able to see what we want to bring, what our truth is, how we can show up for ourselves. And so that is one of the main reasons I wanted to do this webinar today is because I see so many of my clients, my friends, and myself hiding who that person is in the workplace because they're afraid if they show up as that person, they won't be as accepted, they won't be as successful, they won't be as liked. And from that place of not wanting that to happen, they kind of take a step back on who they are and present this people pleasing version of themselves. People pleasing also doesn't seem like that big of a deal. I mean, in the moment, it's just, okay, well, I guess I said yes to another thing. I can't really do that, but I'll find a way. And so we lose sight of the dangers of people pleasing too. And so we are going to cover a lot of stuff on this webinar, all about what people pleasing is, why we do it, and how to stop it. And really, the goal here isn't that you memorize everything that we're talking about today. It's more so that you leave with even just this single message, which is that people pleasing is just lying. It's lying to yourself and others. And it's important for us to see this because it helps us to see what behavior we're doing is people pleasing versus just being nice or whatever, however we think about it, whether we're being ourselves or not, is the determinant of people pleasing. And so, what we're going to do is go through some different content. I'm going to answer your questions as we're going. And then that way, we'll be able to fully get into this issue and talk about how to stop. And you will leave this webinar with a clear idea of your next steps so you can stop people pleasing. Okay, so that is what we are covering. Let's dive in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. I don't know about you, but I'm quite a visual learner, and so it always helps me to be able to have it written in written form on the screen. So you should be able to see that now. All right. So how do we stop people pleasing? Well, to begin with, we need to understand why we want to stop because people pleasing is a type of behavior. And for us to be able to stop a behavior, we need to have a good reason. Otherwise, our brain's just going to keep doing what we're always doing. And so that's why we want to start with this question. Why do you want to stop people pleasing? So just take a moment, jot it down for yourself so that you can get an idea of your reason behind it. And then I'll share too what I often hear from my clients and what my reason was as well. So take a moment, go ahead and write, why do you want to stop people pleasing? All right. So here's what I often hear. I'm sick of committing to things I don't want to do. So with people pleasing, you're often saying yes when you want to say no. You're staying late because you want to avoid glares from your boss. You're eating that cake at that team meeting because you just don't want them to judge you for not. And so you go ahead and you do these things and you agree to things that you just don't want to do, but you don't feel like there's a way out of. You feel like you have to agree because that's what you're supposed to do. I see this a lot in the workplace with people in their teams and their bosses. And what I'd offer to you is there is a way for you to decide whether or not you want to commit for you and not because you think you have to or should. And so that will be something that we can talk about here today as well. Another thing that I often hear is, I want to feel more self confident. Now, with people pleasing, it relates to self confident because when we people please, it derails our confidence. And here's why. People pleasing is us putting the needs of others or what we think they are wanting of us before what we actually really want for us, like for us being able to be ourselves. And so what happens is we present this image of ourselves instead of who we really are and what we really believe. And this image isn't us. And so then we show up as this version of us that isn't even true to us. And so every time we do that, we're telling ourselves, hey, for you to be accepted, you actually just need to be a different person. And so we show up as this fake version, and it derails our confidence because it's just each time you're saying you're not worth presenting because it's better to present this artificial version of you instead. Every time you do that, it's like a hit to the confidence, a hit to the self-esteem. And so if you're somebody who feels like you just don't have the confidence that you want or low self-esteem or just don't always feel like you're enough, that can happen and be created through continuous people pleasing. And even the fact that you are people pleasing can come from this lack of confidence too. So it's like a cycle that plays into each other that can just get worse. So if you're someone who relates to this, when we stop people pleasing, we start to build that self confidence back up. We won't have time to dive into that specific relationship in this 1 hour. And I wanted to really focus this on what I think would be most helpful for you to be able to apply something right away. And so what that means is here in this webinar, we'll talk about how to stop people pleasing. If you want to go farther though and talk about self-confidence, then I highly recommend that you sign up for a consultation call with me. And that's where we'll dive into your brain for an hour, talking about what's working for you and where your confidence is. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the very end. So if you're interested, stay on at the end after we wrap up the content here, and then you'll be able to hear about that. Another thing people often tell me is people pleasing is holding me back in my career and life. And this was me, so much so. So if when you registered for this webinar, or just however you're watching this, if you're watching this in the replay, what I shared was a bit about my story. And I was a perpetual people pleaser. And the reason I was because it seemed to work, right? I mean, if you think about in school, you get an A, you get rewarded, your parents say good job, you say good job, colleges are going to love you. There's all this data out there, or all this belief out there about why you need that A. And so if you get the A, you get praised. I'm not saying that getting the A is people pleasing, but what I am saying is chasing the praise at the expense of showing up truly as you and telling your truth. And when I say that sounds a little woo-woo, what I mean is literally just saying what you're thinking instead of lying about what you're thinking or about presenting yourself in a way that isn't you. And so we do that to get the praise. And so over time, this worked for me. I got jobs, I got raises, I was moving along in corporations. But what I noticed is what was working for me, this people pleasing, was starting to hold me back. And I remember the day my boss pulled me aside when I was in corporate and said, Lisa, people want to hear from you more. We feel like we don't really know you. We want to hear your opinion. This really made me take a step back because what I realized was I thought that I had been sharing my opinion. I didn't quite get it at first. And I was a little upset at first too. But as I thought about it, what I realized I'd been doing was just presenting the opinion I thought people wanted me to have. And that worked to get me to where I was. But for me to get to the next step, that wasn't going to keep working because there comes a point where people don't want the yes person, the people pleaser, the one who just says what you think that they want you to say. They want somebody who has a mind and an opinion and can speak back and can critique and be a brainstorm partner and help take you, the organization, your clients, your team to the next level, which means not a people pleaser, but somebody who knows who they are, what they believe, and is not afraid to express it. And so that is how people pleasing can hold us back in our lives and in our careers. And that was what really got me to start examining this idea of people pleasing. And it's something I notice in my clients as well. And then the last one, which we've touched on a couple times that I often hear, is they feel like they don't even know who they are anymore. They don't know. And it makes sense because they haven't been being who they are. So, of course, you don't know. So, if this is you, don't use this as an opportunity to say, like, oh, I don't know who I am and make it into this big dramatic problem because it doesn't need to be. All that we need to know is that we haven't been presenting ourselves the way that feels true to us. Okay, that's just a behavior. That's all it is. We can change that. We can find that person who you are, and you already are that person. It's just you haven't really been listening to that part of yourself. And so this webinar will help you to start listening to that part of yourself more so you can represent that person to yourself and to the world. Because guess what? They need to hear it. You're here on this earth for a reason. Just the fact that you exist is evidence of that. And so that means you're here to exist as you. So let's start being that person. Let's start being the you that you know you are, that you don't have to hide anymore. So to do that, we will start by defining what people pleasing is and what it isn't, because we often get that mixed up. And then we're going to dive into the steps to stop people pleasing. Because guess what? It's just a process. And when we see this as a process, it takes some of the heaviness away. Because it means we don't have to go back and look at every angle where we've people pleased in the past and try to figure out what's wrong with us and make it about all of these things that happened or the way we were raised or society, whatever you think is the reason. We don't even need to go there. All we need to do is talk about how you can show up right now in this moment as you. And we do that with this process. So this specific 3-step process for stopping to people please. And then at the end, I've reserved time for questions. Now, please ask questions throughout if you have them. But I also can see and understand that sometimes the questions don't come until the end, once you get all the content. And so because of that, I have reserved some time at the end to answer questions. And I also want to share with you a special offer for that consultation call that I mentioned earlier. This is an hour where we talk about what's coming up for you in your life so we can really get into what's happening, what's working, what's not working, and what might be getting in the way. So I'll tell you more about that at the very end. All right, so I have taken a moment already to introduce myself, so we don't need to spend a lot of time here. What I do want to say, though, is that this webinar, it comes from personal experience that is then backed by data. So I have that master's in industrial organizational psychology, which is like psychology applied to the workplace, certification in life coaching, and then also am an experienced trainer and coach with topics related to leadership development, communication, professional growth. And I've taken all of that together and really use that to narrow in on this idea of people pleasing and how we can stop it. I'm also a recovering people pleaser myself. And this picture of donuts is what I use to represent what I call the donut downfall. And so I want to share this story with you because it's a good example of how innocently people pleasing behaviors can kind of like creep up into your life and you don't even know it, but over time it can really cause problems. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for a moment here because you saw the donut picture. And here's what happened. I worked in this company. It was pretty small. There was maybe 3 people there. And what I noticed over time was how much I was people pleasing. And the time that I really noticed it was one of my coworkers came in and brought a box of donuts in. It was a Friday and she was doing it as a kind gesture. And she goes, "Lisa, I have a donut for you." And I don't like donuts. I mean, there's other things that tempt me, but donuts are not one of them. But she says this to me and I say, "Oh, great. I'll save it for after lunch." which was a complete lie because I had no interest in the donut. I was grateful that she thought of us. I thought that was nice, but the actual act of me saying I'm saving it after lunch was a complete lie. So the day goes on. I haven't had my donut yet because I'd never planned on eating one. And it comes to the end of the day, and there's still maybe half a box of donuts left. And so she goes, I've already had a lot of donuts. I don't need to bring these home. I have other sweets at home. Who would like to take them home? No one really said anything. And so she turns to me and goes, Lisa, you haven't had your donut yet. Would you like to take them? And I felt so on the spot. I honestly did not want the donuts. I don't even like donuts. I was starting to get a little resentful that she kept trying to get me to eat these donuts. But I also didn't want her to be upset with me. I didn't want her to think I thought I was too cool for school, like not eating donuts when everyone else in the office was. So I said, sure, I'll take them home. If I don't get to them, my husband might, which was also a lie because my husband, he doesn't like donuts either. So I knew the whole time that I was never going to eat these. And yet here I go walking home with this box of donuts. And I bring this story up because it's kind of ludicrous in a way. Like, I have no desire for donuts. They're just donuts. I could have just said no, but I didn't. Why? Well, because I wanted to be accepted. I didn't want to come across as better than, which is some thought I had about me taking donuts home. So I lied about what I really wanted and who I really was in order to acquiesce and seem agreeable and fun and like someone who just has donuts on the weekend or whatever, so that I would be accepted and so that I would be a team player eating the donuts with the gang, which seems like not a big deal. But as you do this over and over, I'm basically telling myself that my wants don't matter. The fact that I don't want donuts is irrelevant because they wanted me to have donuts. So that's what mattered. So you're always putting what you think other people want of you first, and it beats you down. So these simple, innocent, I say innocent with quotes because it seems like not a big deal. Sure, just lie a little bit. Just say you have plans. Like, just make stuff up. That just tears your confidence down because you start to lose sight of who you are as a person. So that is why it's so important for us to stop people pleasing. And that's why I'm here today to share this with you. All right. So now that we get the importance of people pleasing, let's talk about what it is. So, what is people pleasing? Well, there's a couple myths about it. The first myth is that people pleasing is being nice. So this is this idea that if I'm people pleasing, I'm really just being nice. Like, that's what I was telling myself in the moment as I grabbed the donuts. But here's the thing. It's not being nice because, one, it's a lie. And so you're not being nice to yourself about your own needs. And you're really not being that nice to your coworkers because you're never giving them the opportunity to meet who you are. And I think one thing that really changed my perspective on people pleasing was I thought it was like black and white. Either you people please and you're nice and you're loving and you're kind, or you're mean. You're kind of like a rude, judgmental, crappy person. And I didn't want to be that person. So the only option that left was to be nice, which in my mind was just doing what I think people wanted me to do. And it sounds obvious in a way now, but in the moment, it's so subtle. You don't always even catch it. You just think you're being that team player, dutiful, humble, nice, one of the gang, but you're not being you. You're not being who you really are. So there's a way for you to not people please and still like the way you're presenting yourself. An example with this idea of being nice is, for me, I used like, if somebody says, I'm wearing this sweater, what do you think? And you actually think the sweater looks terrible on them? Well, my mind thought then I had to just tell them it looked terrible. So, hey, that sweater looks terrible because that's my truth. That's what I believe. And that's true. That is what I believed. And that would not be people pleasing because people pleasing would be lying and saying, oh, you look great, even though you didn't believe that. So what do you do if you don't want to say it's terrible, looks terrible on you, and you don't want to people please, which is saying, oh, like it looks great when you don't think it does. It just felt like a lose-lose. What I've realized though is that you don't have to say the most direct thought that comes to your mind. What another truth is, it's not my favorite sweater on her. It's not my favorite. So if you position it in that way, you're not lying. You're telling your truth. It's not my favorite. But you're also deciding how you want to present it. Because I like to think about how I would respond if somebody said to me, that looks terrible, versus it's not my favorite. I know myself would be able to better plan my next step if somebody said, that's not my favorite. And so in that instance, you can decide to be that person, and be true to yourself and say, you know what, friend, it's not my favorite. What else do you have? That's you being true to yourself and not people pleasing. And so what this means is you can be a people pleaser and be nice, or however you define that. It could be kindness. You see it as kindness for yourself, but you're still not doing it for the other person. You're doing it for you. You're thinking about how it would feel for you if you said, it's not my favorite, and how they would respond. So it's still that what you're saying is about you, but you're doing it in a way where you're able to be truthful to yourself, but don't have to, which includes not just saying it's terrible. Because there's different types of communication styles. Some of us are more direct communicators, some are indirect. Both are fine. The key, though, is that you are not lying. You are telling your truth and what you think. Okay. Next, it creates acceptance. People pleasing, this myth out there is that it creates acceptance. It doesn't. Because even if you get quote unquote accepted, people like you get the raise, they're not accepting you. They're accepting that artificial version of you. So there's never any acceptance happening. And in my mind, people pleasing is the ultimate rejection, because you're rejecting you. You're not even accepting you. So how the heck could this actually be acceptance in any form? It's not. The next myth, it's part of my personality. Well, we've talked before, people pleasing is a behavior. So it's not just who you are, it's just what you're doing. So that means you can change it, because like any behavior, it's something that you can keep doing or you can change. And then lastly, it's automatic. And this relates to that idea of the fact that it is a behavior. Sometimes it just feels automatic, though. I've had clients tell me, I don't want to do it, but I just blurt out yes. I don't even know why. Like, I don't even have a chance to think and stop. So it feels automatic. The reason it feels automatic, though, is because you've been enforcing this habit of people pleasing, of telling lies, of saying yes when you want to say no, over and over and over again. And so you've been strengthening that neural pathway in your brain. And so what happens as you do that is it just quickens the process. It's like this freeway you've created for yourself in your brain. So where you say yes so quick, you haven't even noticed the thoughts that went into it. But if we slow that process down, which is what we'll be doing when we talk about how to stop people pleasing, you'll start to notice the precursor to people pleasing. So you can catch yourself in the act, and ultimately then before you do it. And so it doesn't have to be automatic. It's not automatic, even though it does feel like it is. All right. So those are the myths about people pleasing. And we go there first because it's so important for us to debunk these, because these are the reasons we hold on to people pleasing behaviors. These are the reasons we say we want to stop, but we don't stop. It's because of these 4 things, or different variations that boil down to these 4 things. So knowing this and knowing that these are complete myths, we can now start to debunk it. We can start to really show up as who we are, which means really defining what people pleasing is. So to do that, let's actually get into the definition. So what is people pleasing? Well, we've kind of touched on it a couple different times, but it is lying to ourselves and others. That's all it is. It's just the most basic form, is you're lying to yourself and to others. Now, what can happen is I say this and the judgment immediately comes in. At least that's how it was for me. Is this idea that, oh, I've just been lying. Here I was thinking I was being nice, but I've just been lying the whole time to myself, to others. I'm a terrible person. How could I do this? And you can just start to shame spiral. So that is not where we're going, because really all we know is that this is the behavior we've been doing. What it is it's just lying to ourselves and others. You didn't know you were doing it. Even if you did, you didn't know how to stop. Even if you did know how to stop, you didn't have the tools or motivation yet to do it. So there's no need to blame ourselves here. Now you know, though. And now we'll be talking about the process. So you can start to stop lying. Because guess what? When we lie, like we've said, it's portraying that image of ourselves to others that isn't us. So I have this image of this coffee filter here because, like, this is who you are. And I like this image because if we look at this top here where my laser pointer is, that's who you are, which means you already are who you are. It's not like you have to go find this person. Like you don't know who you are and it's way out there in this world and you have to go and try to find it. You're already that person. It's this piece. It's you. But what happened is you take that version of you and you filter it based on what that person wants to hear. Then you filter it again based on what that person wants to hear. And you keep going until you get this watered down version of you. It's like when you have coffee or when you're juicing and you juice all your ingredients. So you get rid of all the fiber and all of like the pulp. And you're just left with this like nice, sweet, smooth drink that doesn't really have much in it. I mean, it has nutrients in it, but it's missing the uniqueness. It's missing the pizzazz. It's missing the pulp, the fiber. It's not there because you've filtered and watered it down. So that's what we're doing when we're people pleasing and when we're lying is we're like filtering, we're hedging ourselves, we're portraying this image of who we are that really isn't fully us. It's also that idea of lying to yourself and others, which we've covered in length. And then what that leads to is losing who you are because you just see this version of you as opposed to being this version of you. But you can be that version of you right now. So why aren't you? Take a moment. Like we've talked about why you people please a little bit earlier, but just take a moment right now and think, why am I not? Why aren't I people? Or why am I people pleasing? All right. So whatever you've identified for yourself, it usually boils down to this concept. Why do we people please? Well, to try to control how others see us. And so we present this image to control how others see us. Well, why do we care about how others see us? It's because we're human. It's not like there's some fatal flaw with us, like we care. Why do I care so much about what other people think? I hear that a lot. And honestly, the answer is because you're human. That is how we evolved. Our brains evolved to see isolation, so being alone, as death because you can't survive alone back in the caveman era when, we were around. So our ancestors were around. And so what that means is we found ways to try to present ourselves in an agreeable manner to others so that we're not in isolation, but have a tribe, have a group of people. And so we did this back in the caveman days. That's how we evolved. So over time, we've continued to hone in that strength of ours. And now in the workplace, it shows up as our tribe becomes our team. And so we're trying to control how they see us, and we do it by lying. And so that's why we people please. It's simply because we're human. It's the way we evolved. But just because we evolved that way doesn't mean we need to keep behaving in that way. And I think this is important for us to know because sometimes we can feel stuck. We can feel trapped behind this idea that because we're human and this is how we evolved, like we can't change it. But that's when people think it's like just kind of a part of them. But we can. Because again, it's just that behavior, that lying to yourself, and we can stop that. And that is where we go now, which is the steps to stop people pleasing. And this is so important for us to know because it's a process. And when something's a process, it means that it's something that you can repeat, you can measure, you can see what's working, what's not working. And that way you can really get in touch with yourself about how to stop people pleasing. And you can test it out. You can see it like an experiment and you can fine tune the process to the point where people pleasing is no longer a problem for you. So let's go into this process. For us to be able to do this though, we need to be clear on why we people please. We talked about how it's because we're human and we want to control how people see us. But I want you to go one step further And I'd like for you to take a moment to answer this question for yourself, which is, what have you gained by people pleasing? What have you gained? We ask this question because there's a reason that we do it. And so get specific with yourself. What is it that you've gained by people pleasing? I'll give you a moment to just go ahead and jot that down. And if you want, you're welcome to put it in the Q&A box, and I'll share it with the group. You're also welcome, though, to just jot it down on your own piece of paper, whichever you prefer. So what have you gained by people pleasing? All right. I know for me, what I gained was a sense of acceptance. But now I see how it wasn't true acceptance. And so that was what I had gained. And also this sense of feeling likable and agreeable. And I was proud to feel like this nice, agreeable person. But now what I see is what I have lost. So that's the next question. What have you lost by doing that? What I lost was being nice and agreeable to myself, right? Because with people pleasing, we're so focused on other people, we lose sight of us and our wants. And so if you want to stop people pleasing, one way you can do that, in the most simplest form, quick way to think about it, is to just use your people pleasing tendencies on yourself. You're great at people pleasing. Why not people please on you, right? Make you the person that you want to please. What would please me right now? Like, what would be so agreeable to myself? Show up as that person. Then you can just use this skill of people pleasing you've been developing over time in a way that's actually more helpful for you. All right, so answer that second question. What have you lost? Take a moment, jot that down. All right. So you see what you've gained. You've noticed what you've been losing. So how do we stop? There's just 3 simple steps. And I say simple because they are simple in the sense that it's just these 3 things. I'm not saying that that makes them easy though. And so what I offer to you as I share these steps is to take some of that pressure off yourself to have to get it just right. At least that's how I notice is my default tendency. So I'm offering to you to free yourself up from having to do that. And instead, just take in what these steps are and start practicing them. Test them out. Experiment with them. See how they're working. See how you can make them work better for you. So take that type of curious mindset, that experimenter mindset, and test it out. And we can make this work for you so you can stop people pleasing. So the first step is to commit to always tell the truth. Again, this is one of those things that, yeah, sounds so simple. Of course, if we say people pleasing is lying, of course, I just need to tell the truth. But people start to think, I don't even know how to do that. What even is the truth anymore? What do I even like? My mentor talks about it, Brooke Castillo, about how she went into the store and she didn't even know what types of flowers she liked. She wanted to buy flowers for herself. But all the things popping up in her head were things like, well, what would my husband like? What would my mother like? What would they like me to have? Instead of what she wanted. And so one thing that can help me is I imagine like if I was by myself, would I make the same decision? If nobody could see me, would I make the same decision? So you're committing to always tell the truth. And when I say tell, it sounds verbal, and it can be, but it can also be nonverbal. So I remember at one of my past coworkers, I can't really know for sure if this was people pleasing because I don't know what her truth was in that moment because it wasn't a verbal thing. But she would always nod her head and put on this smile, like, yeah, sure. The kind of smile where it doesn't reach up to your eyes. And so I never felt like it was truly what she was thinking. Maybe it was. Maybe she was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. But she would do it with this fake looking smile, like, yeah, Like, it wasn't really her. It wasn't really what she was thinking. Like, maybe there was some concern she had that she never voiced that could have helped us get to um, a better solution, but she didn't. And so that's just one example. So it's always telling the truth. So it's not just in what you're saying. It's also kind of in the way you're showing up for yourself. So some tips to help you with this, if you're like, I tell the truth. How do I do that? Sometimes we've been doing this lying for so long, we don't even notice when we're lying. Like, we're like, I would love to tell the truth. I don't even know what that is. So here's what you can do. Stall. You truly don't know what it is. So that's your truth in the moment. I don't know. Hey, are you able to take on this project? I'm not sure. Let me check my schedule. Hey, want to come to this event? I don't know. Well, I'll get back to you. Just give yourself some time so that you can go into your own space and decide, what do I want? Like, if I didn't think my decision was going to impact anyone, what would I do for me? And that's what you can decide. Always, though, make sure you do circle back, because avoidance is just another form of people pleasing where you don't want to confront somebody. So instead of being honest with what you're thinking, you just never talk to them, which is just another form of people pleasing, of lying in a different way. All right, another tip to be able to tell the truth is to plan ahead of time what you think about something. So for me, this shows up with meetings at work. I used to go into this meeting that was about a specific project, and people throw out all these ideas, and I wasn't sure what I thought. And so I would either stay silent or just kind of nod and never really commit to a decision or an opinion, because I didn't know, which, yeah, that's true that I didn't know. But then as people would ask, you just kind of nod along, which isn't really the truth. I never asked myself what I really wanted. So what can help is to, instead, when you have a meeting or something coming up, decide, how do you want to respond in that situation? Make the decision before you even get there, so you know what you think. If it's about a specific project and there's these different modes of how you could proceed, what do I think in this moment? Okay, well, I think option 2. You get in the meeting, it doesn't mean that you don't let the meeting itself help you to clarify what you want, but you at least have a starting point to see, this is what I wanted before this meeting. I'm in this meeting knowing that, and now I'm hearing what everyone else is saying, and I'm bringing that data in, and I can use that to clarify my opinion. But it gives you a starting off point. I use that I go to a lot of networking events, and sometimes the people will call me. And I've learned a lot of times when the people call me to follow up, what they're doing is trying to ask me to buy something or to sell something or to agree to something. And so I know now ahead of time, my default is no. That's my truth. I don't want to purchase something. So I know that, seeing when they call me on my phone, oh, it's so-and-so's name. Okay. And so I know that going into it, and decide that I still hear what they have to say and can change my mind, but I have an opinion already. And so then the last tip I have to help you yourself tell the truth is to go in a process of self-discovery. Take yourself on dates, go places, ask, I'm in the shampoo aisle. If like nobody else was going to use this shampoo, what shampoo would I get for myself? Like, little things like that, just to get to know who you are. Figure out what that person is, because you already are that person. You've just been hiding it. So this will help you to take out the truth that you already have within you, so that you can be that person for yourself. All right, so that is the first step. The next step is identify your feeling before you people please. And this is very important, because people pleasing, again, is that behavior. So what we want to do is, we see this behavior that we're doing, and we want to think like, why do I always agree? Why did I cat sit for her? I didn't want to cat sit. Whatever it is for you, it's that action. So you want to know what you were feeling right before you people please, because it's like an urge. It's like when you have a mosquito bite and it's all itchy, and so you just start scratching it. You don't even always notice that you just automatically start scratching it. You don't notice it. And so it becomes this bloody mess, because you just keep scratching it. And so by identifying the feeling before you people please, so before you scratch, you start to notice. Like with the mosquito bite, it's like, I feel annoyed. Like, I feel the itchy sensation physically. So I notice that, and then I just have this like annoyance. And so I scratch it so I don't have to feel annoyed. But it just makes the mosquito bite worse. So, what is that feeling for you when it comes to people pleasing? So, I want you to just take a moment to think about the most recent time you've people pleased. Uh, just whatever it is, big or small, come up with what that is. So, take a moment. Okay. With that in mind, I want you to ask yourself, what was I feeling right before I people pleased? What was the feeling? If you're not sure what the feeling is, like the word is, ask yourself, how is I physically feeling, like in my body, like the mosquito bite, that like itchy sensation? So, because then at least you'll start to notice your tells for people pleasing. So, what was that feeling for you? For me, it was often guilt. I noticed this guilt would start to creep up. And so instead of feeling guilty, I would people please. One perfect example I can think of is when I was working, I would stay late, not because I wanted to, but because I thought I was supposed to. Now, granted, no one had told me I needed to stay late. I just decided in my head that to be a true team player, you needed to stay late pretty much every day. So I was staying late at work, like answering emails and things like that, so that the boss would see me in a certain way. And I mean, it would be to the point where I would stay, like if I was going to stay till 7:30, I would draft an email at 7 p.m. to the boss responding about something, but I'd wait to send it until 7:30 because I wanted credit for that extra time. And so that's an example of people pleasing, and it's also like I didn't want to feel the guilt of going home at 5 because of what I thought my boss would think. So instead I lied and stayed late. Kind of resented my boss or my team for it, even though nobody told me to stay there. And then when I got home, I would say to my husband, I had to work late, which is another lie because nobody told me that. I told myself that. So I did that so I didn't have to feel the guilt of not coming home earlier. So it was kind of guilt on both ends. So for me, it was always pretty much guilt. But for you, it might be anxiousness, fear, sorrow, or sadness. So figure out what that feeling is. Because when you know what the feeling is, that'll be your cue that you're about to people please. Okay. So the other thing I'll offer to you is if you're not sure what the feeling is, you can also ask yourself, what was I thinking? Because your thoughts are what create the feelings that lead you to people please. So if you don't know what the feeling is, you can at least ask yourself, what was I thinking? And if you can identify that, that is like, oh, when I think this, I feel this way. When I think I should stay late at work, I don't want to, I feel guilty. So what do? Well, I stay late at work and resent my team for it, even though they didn't even tell me to stay. So what is that thought for you is another way for you to think about it. So what we are going to do as the third step is we feel that feeling without giving in to the urge. I'm going to go back to my mosquito bite example because I think it's very tangible. So what I said before is you notice the physical sensation of the itch. It feels annoying. You're thinking, ugh, this feels terrible, or I want it to end. And so you scratch the itch. You scratch it. So you give in to the urge to people please or to scratch the mosquito bite. So what I'm saying now here instead is you're going to, the step 3 is you feel it without giving into the urge, which simply means you notice that your mosquito bite is itching and it feels terrible and you start to feel really annoyed. So annoyed. You just want to scratch that itch so bad, but you don't. You just let yourself feel annoyed and feel that itchy physical sensation of it and think, I should scratch this itch, and you don't. There's a meditation practice like this where I heard once in guided meditation where the person was saying, if you notice like you have a hair in your face or you have a tickle, notice how long can you sit with that tickle and just feel the tickle. You're not resisting it. You're not like gritting your teeth, like trying to just bear through it, like, ah. You're just like, okay, this is where I have that tickle. This is where I just feel the tickle. That's it. And you just let yourself be there in that moment, feeling the tickle, very present. The same with the mosquito bite, and it's the same with people pleasing. So for me, with the work late example, what I started to do was 5 o'clock would come and I would notice that I felt like I should stay late, and then I'd feel the guilt. And I, in that moment, asked myself, all right, Lisa, you can choose to stay late and feel guilty because your husband is like, you're not there for your husband. You can choose to leave and feel guilty because you're not there for your work. Either way, you're going to feel guilty. What do you want to do? Well, if I'm going to feel guilty no matter what, I might as well leave. But there's also times where it's like, I can say yes to go to this networking event that I don't want to go to, or I can and feel go, but kind of resent the fact that I'm there, or I cannot go and feel guilty that I'm not there. If I'm going to either feel resentful or guilty, what do I want to feel? I'm going to choose guilt because that's my truth. So what this is you're feeling the feeling and choosing to feel the feeling instead of people please. You're choosing to let yourself feel guilty, annoyed, sad, depressed, angry. You're choosing to feel that way over people pleasing, because all you're doing with people pleasing is you're like trying to get out of that feeling. But if instead you just let yourself feel that feeling, then there's no problem. You can just feel your way through it. So what's going to happen is you are going to notice this first after you do it. So it'll be after you've gone to that event, the networking event, or after you've said yes, you'll notice that you people pleased. And that's okay. It's still data for you. Then as you practice these 3 steps, you'll start to notice it as you're in the process. As your mouth is forming the word yes when you want to say no, you'll notice it. And that's good because that's showing you're just continuing to move down the process. And then over time, you'll start to notice it right before, because you'll notice this, I'm starting to feel guilty. Okay, this is my opportunity to decide how I want to show up for me. How can I be the way that truthful to me? And then you'll be able to do it. So that's the process. First, you tell the truth. You then identify your feeling before you start people pleasing, and then you feel that feeling without giving in to the urge. So that is how we stop people pleasing. It's 3 simple steps that can be uncomfortable to execute on, because what I'm basically telling you to do is to feel whatever the feeling is that you don't want to feel instead of people pleasing. But when we can do this, we honestly become unstoppable, because when we can feel whatever we need to feel, then nothing has to stop us. We never have to show up as somebody we're not. And that is the ultimate self-confidence, because you are truthful to you about who you are. So you can trust you to always be you and to be accepting of who that is. You no longer need to people please. And over time, you won't even have the feeling come up for you. You'll have somebody ask you to go to an event and you'll think, oh, I wonder if I should go. And you won't feel guilty. You'll just say, no. And you'll just say, oh, thank you for the invite. I'm not going to make it. And so that is how this process can work over time to get you to stop people pleasing. All right. So what we have covered is we've defined what people pleasing is and what it isn't. We've covered the steps to stop people pleasing. And then we are now diving into questions that I will answer for you. So feel free, as I mentioned in the beginning of the call, there's a Q&A box. Go ahead and plop your questions in there, and I will be able to answer them for you on the spot so that you can get what you're wanting out of this webinar. While you're doing that, I want to offer you to sign up for a free consultation. This is a 60-minute call with me. And what it is it's an opportunity for us to dive into your brain. Because what can happen is we go on these webinars, we take in all this content, we have a nice process now that we can use, but we don't know how to implement it. And sometimes that's because we don't have the motivation. And that's where a coach can be so helpful, because the coach takes you through your specific mind. What's showing up for you? What's your version of taking the donuts home that you don't want to take? How did that happen? Why did it happen? And when you work with a coach, it helps you get out of your own head so you can truly see why you did what you did, and stop if it's not helpful for you. You can then take it to the next step, because what we've done in this webinar is talked about how to stop people pleasing. The next step is how to create the life that you want. Now that you're ready to be that person, the one that you are already, that you haven't been being, the true you, what do you want to do with your life? How do you want to take it forward? Working with a coach helps with that. So the first step is to sign up for a consultation. And that's what I'm offering on this call. My sign up link is there. So it's my name, www.lisafilia.com/schedule. And what you'll be able to do is you'll get on the call, and it's 60 minutes where I'll take you through a guided process. You don't need to do anything to prepare. We'll start by talking about where things are with you, with people pleasing, with confidence, with your career. What's going on? What's working? Then we'll talk about what might not be working, what's stopping you, what's getting in the way, and we'll bridge that gap. You'll leave that call with an action plan of specific next steps that you can take to get where you want in your life. I'll also be sharing about my coaching program if it seems like the right fit and if you're interested. But if you're not, I still recommend that you sign up for this call, because this call will give you some specific steps that you can take to take your career where you're wanting to go, your life where you're wanting it to go, because we'll be diving into your brain, what you're wanting and what might be stopping you. And I can help you uncover those patterns for yourself that you might not even be aware of yet because you're so in your own head. So that's what I have to offer for you. Go ahead and sign up for this consultation. You can do so with the link that is on this page. And while you're doing that, I also will be hanging out for the next 7 minutes to answer any questions that you might have. So feel free, again, put those in the Q&A and I can answer them for you. So I'll give you a moment to do that. All right. So, one common question that I tend to get is around this idea of how to show up honestly as yourself, but not be mean. And what I'd offer to you is even the very concern of being mean is a sign that you're trying to people please. Because what that does is it stops you from being able to show up as you. And so, let's go back to the sweater example, where you can either say, it looks great on you, it looks terrible, or it's not my favorite. Those are your three options. And I'm actually going to, so you can see. So those are the three options that you have. How do you want to move forward? That's where the concern of being mean could come in. And so what I'd offer to you is, if in the moment the language isn't coming to you to say, it's not my favorite, or in the moment, really your only thought is it looks terrible, it's better to say it looks terrible than it is to say it looks great. Because at least then you're being honest. It's like, have you ever had something stuck in between your teeth? I often do, right between my two front teeth, right in the middle there. And if everyone's just nodding along and telling me that, or not even, maybe not even mentioning it, just talking with me, never saying that I have spinach in between my teeth, I would be upset. I want to know. Now, I might not like it if you say, oh my God, like you look terrible right now. There's a bunch of gunk between your teeth. I might be embarrassed by that, but I'd still rather hear it than not, than be just told this lie. So sometimes I think about it like that, because it helps me to see that we think it's being mean to say it looks terrible, but isn't that being nicer than lying and saying, oh, it looks great when it doesn't? So it's even just the way you think about this idea of being mean versus nice and what that means. So I just invite you to drop even the need to be nice. What if you didn't have to be nice? What if you could just show up as you? Because guess what? When you're concerned about coming across as mean to someone else, you end up being mean to yourself sometimes. Because if you use that as a reason to lie about what you really want, then you're just being mean to you. You're telling yourself that their feelings matter more than my feelings, and you're trying to control their feelings. You can't even control their feelings, though. You don't know how they'll really respond. You have a guess that they're going to not like if you say it looks terrible, but you actually don't know. And so this is an instant where I would actually think about it in the sense of, what if it were okay to be mean? And let that, as you're building this skill, it can help you to um, stop people pleasing. And then over time, you'll decide how you want to present this information. You can decide if you want to be the one who's a little more direct or a little less direct. We tend to have a natural tendency for how we communicate. And so it'll come for you as you're testing this out. So just be patient with yourself and let it be okay to not necessarily always be nice about it. So that's what I have for you with relation to this idea of being mean or being nice. Another thing that comes up is, how do we stay motivated? Like, I know the process, it's these 3 steps. How do I stay motivated to be able to do it? One thing that I would share is tracking what's happening can help. So in that 3rd step where you're practicing feeling whatever you feel, like the guilt or whatever it is for you, instead of giving in to the urge. So what you can do is you can track every time you do that. And so this is like a jar with beads in it. So every time you want to say yes to people please when you really don't want to go to that event, every time you say no instead, it's a bead in the jar. And as you do this over time, you'll start to see evidence for how you're actually not always a people pleaser. Because right now you see yourself as a people pleaser. You think it's a part of who you are. But the more you do this, and tracking it can help you to gather the evidence of when you don't give in to the urge to people please, the more you do that, the more you'll realize, oh, I'm not necessarily a people pleaser. I've just been doing that. There's all these times I haven't people pleased. That'll help you keep the motivation because you're building that evidence for yourself, because you've been training your brain to see yourself as a people pleaser. So you've only been capturing the data for when you do that. So this is a way to kind of help rebalance the scales and capture just the data where you're not people pleasing. That way you can start to build that side of the evidence back up, because there's all those instances that you haven't accounted for previously. And that when you get 100 beads in your jar, or maybe you want to use like just a tally mark system, it helps you to see, wow, I've done all of this work, and eventually you'll notice before you even people please, and it won't even be a problem anymore. Okay, so we are also human. So it's not like you just solve this problem and it never shows up for you ever again, because again, it's how our brains evolved. So if you have made this commitment to stop people pleasing and then you people please, don't use that as an opportunity to beat yourself up and say you can't do it. Use it as a learning grounds to say, what was I thinking? What did I feel? I wonder why I did that in that situation. And use that data to help yourself moving forward. So that is what I have for you. We are at the top of the hour, and I want to be honorable about our time. So thank you so much for those who have joined. Really appreciate having you, and those of you on the replay as well. Sign up for that consultation call. You can do so by going to that link that I presented earlier, www.lisaphilia.com/schedule. And that's a way for us to dive into your brain specifically so you can apply these tactics to your life. And remember, the key here is that people pleasing is just lying to yourself and others. And this is so good for us to know, because it means it's just this behavior and you can stop it, and you can start to stop people pleasing and fully show up as you right now. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Bye.